Today's khutbah is about chapter 7, section 14. I won't read all the Arabic because it's quite a long section, but it's about Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's visit to Pharaoh's court. The chiefs of Pharaoh's people said, "Surely this is a skillful enchanter. He intends to turn you out of your land. What you advise?" And it then carries on. They said, "Put him off and his brother and send summons unto cities to bring to thee every skillful enchanter." You may use the word magician here instead of enchanter. And the enchanters came to Pharaoh saying, "We must surely have a reward if we prevail." He said, "Yes, and you shall certainly be of those who are near to me." They said, "O Moses, will you cast or shall we cast first?" He said to them, "Cast." So when they cast, they deceived the people's eyes and overrode them, and they produced a mighty enchantment. And we revealed to Moses, "Cast thy rod." Then lo, it swallowed up their lies. So the truth was established, and that which they did became null. There they were vanquished, and they went back abased. And the enchanters fell down prostrate. They said, "We believe in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Moses and that of Aaron, Rabbi Musa wa Harun." And it starts off, "Qala al-mala'u min qawmi fir'auna inna haza la sahirun alim." The chiefs of Pharaoh's people said, "This is a skillful enchantment." The whole section doesn't end here, but I ended with "Qalu amanna bi rabbil alameen, Rabbi Musa wa Harun." And I thought I'll look at this because if you look at the Old Testament description of what happened, we know that what is said is that these magicians, these enchanters, were called to Pharaoh's court, and they cast their rods, and the rods became serpents or snakes. And then Hazrat Musa alayhi salam did exactly the same thing, and his rod became a bigger serpent, and it swallowed all the ones that the magicians, the enchanters, the priests of Pharaoh's court had thrown down. Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali Rahmatullah Alayh has translated these as arguments. They put forward arguments which blinded people with their beauty and their skill and so on and so forth. And then Hazrat Musa alayhi salam put his arguments forward, and they were such that the blindness, the hypnotism caused by the arguments of the magicians or the priests was removed. And it occurred to me, something happened, and it occurred to me that a lot of the difficulty arises that when we try and interpret these verses of the Holy Quran, what we do is this, that we look at something happened in a different society at a different time with our own perspective. So what happened was this. I used to, many years ago, see on the London Underground people carrying luggage with LHR on it. And I used to be puzzled. What puzzled me was this. I thought LHR stood for Lahore. And I thought, hang on, I've lived in Lahore all my life. I haven't seen tens of thousands of British and Japanese and Americans and so on roaming about the streets of Lahore. Where is it that they live? That we locals, natives, never see them. And of course it later transpired that LHR doesn't actually stand for Lahore. It stands for London Heathrow. Now that's an example of how, when you look at something in another branch of knowledge or society or culture and try interpret that in the light of the society or the culture you have come from, that you can be misled. So I looked at the Egyptian society of the time. Obviously, I didn't actually get into Doctor Who's TARDIS and go back and sit and have a meal with the Pharaoh. I just read into the history of this society, and a number of very interesting facts emerged. You of course have Pharaoh at the top, and then you have nobility and the priests. Priests because they are peoples linked to God. If priests are to keep their hold over the people, then they must show them some magic. And they had these magicians. Now, the interesting thing about these magicians, who the priests used to blind people and impress people, was this, that they weren't Paul Daniels. They weren't doing sleights of hand. They were actually using physical laws to produce effects which ordinary people could not understand or explain. Now, some of these things are obvious to us. Pyramids, how did they build them? How did they cut these massive stones? How they got them into place? But even more surprising is that if you looked into, for example, the Great Pyramid, if you look into the king's chamber, the drilling that these people carried out is so fine and so meticulous that even today, with all the advanced computers and technology and so on, the same sort of drilling cannot be carried out. We know we can't do mummification, for example, which Egyptians succeeded at. Another amazing thing is project management. You're building this structure. All these things have to be in place at a certain times. Foundations dug, stones cut wherever they were cut, they had to be transported by barge to wherever the pyramid was located, taken off the barge. They didn't have any cranes. How did they take these massive stones off the barge and to the side of the pyramid? If you go to India, and if you look at the Taj Mahal, if you look at there is a tower just outside Delhi. Well, it used to be outside Delhi. It's a part of Delhi now, built by a king called Qutbuddin Aibak. And you can see calligraphy. You can see mosaics. And you can see them drawn on little tiles. And then those tiles are fitted together. Now these are verses of the Holy Quran. So someone had to make sure that when these verses were carved into these stones, they were carved in the correct sequence. Because obviously they're separate tiles, which are then going to be put together. So they had some means of organizing all of this. So what I'm saying to you is this, that these ancient people had a lot of advanced technology that we know about, and perhaps we never think about it, that we can see before our very eyes. How did they cut these little tiles with such fine mosaic work and colouring that after hundreds of years that colour is still there. I mean, whether the pollution now destroys those colours and so on is a separate issue, but it's lasted this long. But more than that, these people, because they wanted to blind people, these were general things that kings were doing, but because priests wanted to blind people, they had to show them this magic. And they gathered together the most brilliant scientists and engineers of their time into their temples to perform these magic tricks. For example, we know in many places when we approach the doors of a supermarket, the doors automatically open. At least one, if not more, of the Egyptian temples had exactly the same thing. What they did was they somehow managed to get a slab to float on water. So the displacement of water must have been sufficient to support that slab. Those of you who were unfortunate enough to have to do O-level physics would probably remember Archimedes leaping out of his bath with no clothes on. And it's exactly the same principle, but long before, around that sort of time. And when an extra person went and stood on that slab, that increased the weight, pushing the water up. And when it pushed up, it pushed the doors aside. The doors opened, the person went in, the weight was removed, and the water went back in. Now, as far as those people were concerned, they didn't know about hydraulics, they didn't know about Archimedes, and they didn't know about all of this engineering and so on. And to them it was magic. That look, I go and stand at the door of this temple and it's got these heavy doors and they just slide open. Like that. Another thing they had, which was, in fact, in a way, a money-making scheme. And that was that they said, when you go into a temple, you must wash. And it's not enough that you wash with ordinary water. It has to be holy water. And you must have a certain minimum measured amount. And they invented the world's first vending machine. It was a very simple lever arrangement. You had a lever, there was a hole at the top, and when you dropped a coin, it landed on top of the lever, increasing the weight slightly and lifting it. That side lifted, that was attached to a plug, so there was a hole. And water began to flow, but of course as it went down, the coin slid off, restoring the balance. Plug went into the hole, and you got a cup full or whatever it was, cup full of water. Of course, those people regarded it as magic. They had singing birds. What they did was to boil water. And as steam escaped, it was channeled into pipes and it came out from, obviously they made a bird that was hollow inside, from the bird's beak. And the arrangement was such that as the steam escaped, it had cooled down so you couldn't see the steam. The sound came out like a bird singing. Now all of this, which I can today explain to you using physics and so on and so forth, was novel and magic to these people. So when it was written down as magic and sorcery and miracles and so on and so forth. And when we look at these words and these things out of context, as in the Old Testament, that they threw their staffs and they became serpents. Now looking at these mechanical devices, I don't know. Maybe they had some kind of mechanical devices, like the singing bird. They certainly had in Egypt and in Greece, and robots, automatic theatre. So they'd have a box, and in that you will have people who, again using water and steam and so on and wearing the pressures, would move around the box. And people would see them and they say, what great magic is this? That our priest, he touches this box, and these things which have no life, which if you take them out of the box are just going to drop on the floor, but our priest touches this box and they start moving as if they're alive and they have come to life. But people writing, there were two things. Scientists didn't want the priests to know these things, how they did them, and the priests didn't want the people to know what was being done and how it was being done. Because if people had realized that all it is, while I drop this coin and it drops on this lever that lifts this plug and fills a cup with a certain amount of water, and in the meantime the coin slips off, so the lever goes down and the hole is plugged, where is the mystery? Why should that scientist have an easy life? Why should that priest be able to demand sacrifices and gifts and whatever? So these things were deliberately cloaked in mystery. What I did was I had a short list of these things. Pharaoh, a writer in AD 100, lists a few ancient machines. A slot machine, the vending machine I've talked about. A surveyor's theodolite, I don't know what that is, anyway, whatever it is. A syringe, a solar-powered fountain, I didn't realize that, and a mechanical singing bird. First steam engine, described by Pharaoh, was created by heating water in a large sealed metal cauldron. Two pipes carried steam from it into a metal sphere fixed on pivots above it, causing it to rotate. Electricity, hydraulic drive, this is again the doors that I just described to you. And there is even a device and instructions in a museum about how to make a battery. These things weren't widely understood, and the reason is, as I've explained to you. And you see, in India it used to be the same thing. You'll have a great Hakim, a doctor, and he would not divulge all his learning and experience and tricks of the trade, so to speak, to his students. Because if he did, they would go and open up their shop and he'd lose his custom. And this was more or less similar. The scientists didn't want the priests to know, because then the priests would need to depend on them. The priests didn't want the people to know, because then there'll be no mystery, there'll be no magic. There'll be no, my son is ill, and last time I went to the temple, the priest put his hand on this box and these dead figures came to life. Now if I go and pay him £10,000 and ask him to pray for my son's life, surely a person who can make inanimate objects dance like human beings, he can save my child. And this is why all these things have become magical and mysteries and so on. Well, certainly if you look at it, those priests who debated Moses, if they had power, such power that they threw down their staffs and they came to life, they had power to create life, which only God has. And you can say the same thing about Moses, but a Muslim would argue, well, God temporarily gave Moses that power to create life, to destroy those. But what about those unbelieving, idol-worshipping priests who were there to challenge and defeat a prophet of Allah? What about them? So I would suggest that if you look at these things, take them as miracles if you want to. I have no objections to that. It's up to you. But I would suggest that if we try and look at these things in the context of the time and the society when they were happening, we will find a lot of them can be explained by simple science. And there was no magic, there was no miracle, and none of these things. There might have been mechanical devices. Moses might have had one of his own. There might have been, as Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali suggests, there might have been simple arguments. They put their arguments and they were so great that they enchanted and hypnotized the people. But Hazrat Musa's arguments destroyed them. I came across these things and I thought I would share them with you. And I hope you found them interesting.